Hi, Dr. Bertolotti here. I wanted to talk a little bit about dynamic assessment, which Green introduced in a limited fashion in Chapter 7 in his Trends in Assessment chapter. On page 209, Green had this quote: "The process of mediation constructs for the learners a zone of proximal development, the distance between what they are able to do with support from others and what they are able to do independently." I think as instructors, many of us are aware of the idea of the zone of proximal development, which is highly regarded and discussed in sociocultural theory. And the idea is when we give learners tasks, we don't want them to be too easy, things that they can already do, because that doesn't encourage growth. And we don't want them to be asked to do tasks that are too hard, because that not only is frustrating, but because they don't have the skills yet to grow and complete those tasks. So the idea is we really want to hit it in this sweet spot, the zone of proximal development, just right next to, right near where they are currently, so that they can think it through and grow and complete the task with some stretch, so that they move in growth and development. So and I think we do that a lot, right? A lot of instruction is looking at our learners informally and formally, assessing where they are, and helping them get to the next place. And this mediation is the term that's used in dynamic assessment theory of constructing that zone where to really see where those boundaries are, what they can do with support, and how much mediation is needed to get them to where they need to be independently. So it's kind of defining those boundaries, mediation is. So if we think about this, maybe we have 3 learners, and in the first learner, when we give them a task, they're not able to do it. But with a little bit of support, maybe a hint, they can then do the task independently. Maybe when we go to the next student, they're unable to do the task independently, and we give a little hint, and they're still not there yet. So we give them maybe a little more specific hint, or another strategy, and then they're able to do the work. And maybe as we move to the next learner, the hint doesn't work, the one strategy doesn't work, another mediation, they're still not quite ready to do it on their own, so we continue the mediation until they're able to do the task. If we think about it, if we assess them just on the task itself, each of the students would have gotten a 0, right? None of these students that in this hypothetical example could do the task on their own independently. So if we assess that, they all would have failed. But remember, in this idea of mediation, in the zone of proximal development, we really do want to give students tasks that are that encourage them to stretch, right? To be beyond what they can do easily on their own. So that's sort of the idea, the criticism that dynamic assessment has with static assessment, where we just give the task and the students have to do it independently. Because in this example, for instance, this is one of the criticisms, all of those students would get a 0, but they're not all the same, right? The first student actually could work independently with just a little bit of support. So maybe instead we might want to measure that in dynamic assessment. the first student just needed a little hint, whereas the second student needed 3 mediations. That distance between what they are able to do with support and able to do independently is 3 mediations or 5 mediations. Now, so that's one of the ideas of dynamic assessment. We might want to measure not just what our students can do independently, we might want to assess what they can do with some support, because this is useful not only as instructors, but it also captures the difference between these 3 hypothetical learners. In addition to that, we might, as instructors, want to take note of which strategies each of the students might need in order to accomplish the task. That information might be very important as we do these mediations. So when you're thinking about this and reading about dynamic assessment, think about how this might look in the classroom. I suspect that many of us do this kind of assessment informally. So how might we make this more formal? In other words, I think often when we give our students a task and we check in with each one, we do kind of make note of who did the task independently, who did it with just a little bit of hint of where to start, or a hint as to what strategy to use. And then we also take note of who needs a little more support and what kind of support they need. And we do that informally. How can that be possibly converted to a formal assessment? Something that we can share with other stakeholders like parents and teachers other teachers that have this student either simultaneously or subsequent to our classroom.